Central High School, inside the northern city limits of Knoxville, Tennessee, has a long history and tradition of excellence in academics, sports, and the arts. The current school building opened in the early 1970s. However, Central's original location is a few blocks away and now houses Gresham Middle School. Located in the historic Fountain City community, these schools have long been a center of pride for the surrounding residents. In many communities throughout America, the early 20th century saw growth in the interest of town bands. Usually organized by volunteers who were former military band members, these groups gradually became part of the curriculum of many high schools. The instrumental music program at Central was one of the first organized in Knox County and has been recognized for excellence in leadership in this region since its earliest days.
I'm David Dixon. I came to Gresham and Central in 1982 at the request of Norman Woodall to serve as an assistant band director. Since then, I've heard so much about this band program. Not only is it the oldest band in the Knox County area, but we have a rich heritage of memorabilia from its past. With the passing of Norman Woodall in 2002, I began thinking about some of the past stories of the band that he had told me. Some of them were even stories that Odell Willis had told him about the 40s and 50s history of the band. I began scanning some of our oldest photographs, at first simply for preservation, but that led to the creation of this project. One of the first things I discovered was that despite having been here for almost a quarter of a century, there's still a lot of the history of the band that I had no idea about. I'm just sorry that I can't include all of the stories that I've heard throughout this project. The most amazing thing for me, though, has been meeting so many alumni. The Central Band still holds a special place in the memory of so many of them, some even 60 years later. With their help, I'm proud to be able to bring you this story.
Central High School first opened its doors in 1906 on the campus of the former Holbrook Normal College. At the time, it was the only high school outside the city limits, and at first was called Knox County High School. As early as 1908, there was an orchestra of sorts at the school. Small in number and with a flexible instrumentation, it included several faculty members as performers and sponsors. As the school grew, the orchestra struggled on, some years with as few as 12 members. In 1919, an English teacher at Central became the new principal. Miss Hattie K. Gresham was believed to be the first woman to serve as principal at a high school in the state. She was by all accounts an amazing woman who built Central from modest beginnings to one of the most outstanding high schools in Tennessee. She was revered by thousands of Central students over the years, and the middle school on this site today is named for her. Another important figure in the early musical life of Central was L.H. Brickey. Mr. Brickey served as both a faculty sponsor and performing member, on trombone, of the orchestra and the band in their formative years. He later became superintendent of the Knox County school system, and Brickey Elementary School today bears his name. This plaque is still in the Gresham Auditorium today. The school annual was called the Sequoia, and it is in the 1928 edition that the first band is recorded. High school bands were quite rare in that era, and the school seemed proud of its new addition. This page named 28 players and listed Neil Gray and C.C. Cottrell as the directors. The directors were not listed in the faculty section, and indeed were probably part-time or even volunteer teachers. The band's first performance was at a Knox County basketball tournament.
Here's the group, posed in the old wood gymnasium. Many bands in those early years had to utilize any players they could find. Indeed, the instrumentation in this photo does not match the personnel listed in the Sequoia. And some of these drummers don't really look like they are old enough to be in high school. The directors are shown, and Mr. Brickey is here with his trombone. He is also listed as the faculty sponsor. There were no girls in the group.
The first year, a stated goal of the band was raising funds for uniforms. They seem to have been successful, as shown in the 1929 annual. This photo, posed on Pruden Field, shows some 33 band members and again lists Mr. Gray and Mr. Cottrell as the directors. The uniforms include capes and hats. Some of these houses in the background may still be seen today along Gresham Road beside the school. The directors were still not listed as official faculty members, but one of the candid photos in the Sequoia that year included these small views of drum major Tommy Malacote and student sponsor Ruth Wood.
The 1930 Sequoia shows a band of 26 students and lists only Neil Gray as the director. Posed on the front lawn of the campus, this photo also has a view of the neighborhood from that period.
Band alumni Jay Garrison told me that the White House in the background of this photo belonged to his grandparents. His grandfather, J. Frank Davidson, came to Central as a math teacher in 1906 and was the principal from 1912 to 1918. Mr. Garrison's mother, Margaret Garrison, was born in this house and taught home economics at Central from 1938 through 1982. Central principal Hassie Gresham lived as a boarder in this house for many years. She later moved into a small brick house on the other side of the campus. That brick house burned, but an outdoor classroom has been built on the site using salvaged bricks from the house.
Mr. Gray is still not listed in the faculty section, but this unlabeled page of faculty photos includes Miss Gresham, social studies teacher and longtime Fountain City historian Nanny Lee Hicks, and this dapper fellow holding a trumpet case must be Director Neil Gray. Then, as the Depression took hold, things changed. This newspaper clipping from April 5, 1931, explains that with times being so hard, they could not afford to publish a school yearbook.
The next few years yield little information. The annual was not published again until 1935. However, those years were very important ones for the school. Even though economic times were difficult, Miss Gresham convinced local officials to personally inspect the old building housing the school. It had become a dangerous fire hazard, and she was successful in obtaining support for a bond issue to build a new school.
Constructed in less than 12 months during 1931 and 1932, the new building was a great source of pride for the community and is still in use today as Gresham Middle School. How fitting that it is named for the formidable woman who successfully convinced local officials to rebuild it, even during the Great Depression. This photo is from the 1935 annual. Reborn as the Central Light, the annual that year did not include any mention of a band.
In the 1935-1936 Central Light, the band is finally back with over 40 members. However, this did not just happen. In this photo, the trombone player on the far right was Albert Harris. He was already dating his future wife, Helen Minot, and she remembers the difficulties encountered in restarting the band in the fall of 1935. Knoxville High School already had a band, so the school board hired Malcolm Morrison to revive the band program at Central. At a school assembly or chapel at the first of the school year, Miss Gresham helped Mr. Morrison get started.
Miss Gresham introduced him. This is our new band director, and his name is Malcolm Morrison. And he said, I want you all to look in your attics, anywhere, and find band instruments. Please ask anybody they know that has an instrument that's not being used, and you bring it, and we'll put this band together.
They found the old capes and hats from the 1920s and improvised for the rest of the uniform. The stripes for the pants were ribbons that had to be basted on and later removed for each performance. Considering the fact that many of the students were rank beginners, Mr. Morrison somehow managed to prepare the group for their first performance by early November. The occasion was the Armistice Day Parade on Gay Street downtown.
Okay, now I want everybody to have a white shirt, and you must have a black necktie. And then you wear, of course, black pants. Mr. Morrison, at that time, down on the corner of Hotel and Broadway, there was a little novelty store. And he went down there and asked those people to order grosgrain ribbon. I think it was, I'd say, about 1.5 inches, red grosgrain ribbon. And then he'd cut 2 pieces and give them to you. I don't know how many times I basted those ribbons. I got pretty good.
To support the band for their first performance, Miss Gresham allowed students to miss school to go to the parade to cheer for the band. This was evidently a rare occurrence.
That was a first, I believe. She was so wanted to be so helpful. She said, now, you can go 10 o'clock, you go to town, you see the parade, you'll have your lunch hour, but you must be back here by 1 o'clock for the period after lunch. And I have called the power company and to send extra streetcars to Fountain City so that you all can ride to town. So Olive and I told the boys, we will be standing in front of the S&W. But now don't you all look over there at us, because you'll get out of step.
But that first performance was not quite what they had expected.
Just about the time they got to the street, it started sprinkling rain. And the farther up Gay Street they came, the harder it rained. And you could see the white shirts were already streaked with that red lining.
Ms. Harris had told me about a certain stairwell at the school where Al would stop to tie his shoe. This allowed him to wait for her to come down the hall so they could then walk up the stairs together. I brought a photo to show her of what I thought was the correct stairwell.
So he'd come out of that room right there and tie his shoe, and you guys would go up the stairs there.
That's right.
So I got the right stairwell that looks right
got
to
it. You got it.
Ms. Harris knew that Mr. Morrison had been in the Dobbins Bennett High School Band in Kingsport, but no other details of his background and training are known. He also directed the orchestra and presented a combined spring concert at the end of the school year. He stayed on at Central one more year, 1936-1937. This page from the 1937 Centralite shows an orchestra of 24 members and a 45-piece band. The band is still wearing the capes and hats we first saw in 1929. Pruden Field now has a wood fence enclosing it, and one of these two tuba players is Beecher Mize. Beecher was an excellent pianist who later became a published composer. His family perhaps holds the record for Central Band participation. 9 students across 3 generations, including an all-state trombonist among the grandchildren. His sons, J.B. and Ron, with grandson, Jeff, told me more about Beecher.
Musically, God gave him a gift. I used to hear people say that, it's a God-given talent. He says, you're exactly right, but don't forget old Beech worked at it. During his growing up years, they were able to give him 13 piano lessons at 25 cents a piece. And from there, he was kind of self-taught. When he got to Central, it got to the point where they had an extra sousaphone. Charlie Bullard was already playing in the band at the time, and they were needing another player. So Charlie came over to Dad's house one night and taught him the fingering on the sousaphone, and the next day he joined the band. So I think that was his background as far as getting into it. He played in a dance band, Sam Beatty Orchestra, during high school, and played piano in that group. But his band time was mainly on either the double B-flat bass or the sousaphone.
Jeff remembered a band trip to Orlando in 1989.
My grandparents came down as unofficial chaperones and took their spring vacation and came to the concert. So that was neat for my friends to sort of hang out with a former band member from the 30s, and that's where a lot of these stories that we're going to hear tonight were first introduced to the kids of the late 80s and the early 90s.
Beecher was present at many concerts where his grandchildren performed, and the last time I got to speak to him, he was intrigued by our new computer system that could print music. I never got to show it to him, but it was an honor to know him. After these modest beginnings, a major change was about to take place.